Right, so here we are. Just moving my bottle of water. So, button here. Right. Episode one of a new little thing. I'm not going to call it episode numbers, actually. Fuck it. So, this is just the first episode that I'm recording of a new little series or whatever that I'm making, which I'm going to call Book Club. I read books. I read a few at the same time, but this is episode one. I just want to give an overview of a book that I've read. I'm going to do this for all the books that I finish reading. Fuck it. So, this one, first one, Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin, right? George R. R. Martin is, in my opinion, the best fantasy writer of our generation, easily. He's obviously famous for writing the A Song of Ice and Fire saga, which has been adapted into the TV series A Game of Thrones, right? And now House of the Dragon, which is what this book is based off. No. This book is what House of the Dragon is based off of. Okay, I started reading it because I watched the first series of House of the Dragon, and I was like, "This is really good." And then I went back and read. This is like a prequel kind of thing to the Song of Ice and Fire series. It's like I'll tell you, right, I'll describe the book now. Okay, so it's essentially like a historical account of events that happened in Westeros in the Game of Thrones universe from Aegon the Conqueror, his conquest, up until a point in the history of the Targaryen lineage, which is like almost halfway through with, I believe, Aegon the Third, even though I literally finished reading it last night. I believe it was Aegon the Third. Let me check this. Yes, I believe this is true. There will be another one of these, I guess, tying it off from from Aegon the Third, where it left off, to one would assume it would be the Mad King, but I don't know that, do I? Could be any point, but this is a big book, right? So look, George is the best fantasy writer of our time, hands down. He's blasted out some brilliant books, all right? Let's give him a bit of patience with Winds of Winter, you know? Let's give him some patience. He's obviously been working on it a long time. He's what's that? A gardener writer, right? He's not a, what do they call it? Architect. Okay, so let's let him just tend to the garden, sort his stuff out, and he will produce something that will be amazing, as he always does. Okay, but this book is quite long, 711 pages. It's quite a big book. I enjoyed parts of it. There were some parts of it that I really enjoyed, and I couldn't put the book down. The 50, sometimes 50 plus page chapters were interesting. Like sometimes I woke up, I was on kind of like a holiday for a week, and I woke up and I was like, I'll just read a chapter, and it went on for 50 pages, and I was like, well, I couldn't put it down, but it was a long chapter, and it was written in a way that was very strange to me. It took me a long time to actually get my head into how it was written. It's almost written like Genesis in the first chapter of the Bible, the first book of the Bible, the first book of Moses, right? It's almost written like Genesis in the King James version. It's written like a historical account of things that happened in the past. You know, there's minimal dialogue between characters because it's supposed to be like what the maesters at the time wrote down about what happened, and some, there's other accounts within this that are picked apart. It's interestingly written. I haven't read another book like this. Okay, it's interesting, and it's definitely, when you think about novelty of a book, it's definitely very novel, because other than the Bible, I've not really read another book that is written in this way. Is it the easiest book to read? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It is definitely easier to read character based storyline with dialogue and thoughts and actually following people properly. It was hard sometimes to hear about what field 50 lords had a battle on and what happened to them when you don't really have an image in your head of what they look like, who they are. They're just a load of fucking random lords. It is quite difficult to imagine these things. It is almost like I was just reading lots of this just for the information, if you know what I mean. There were some parts. The further I got into the book, the more I began to be able to picture what was going on, which is a shame because Aegon's Conquest, I wish I could picture more of that. So maybe will I reread it? I don't know. Probably not for a while. I'm going to start on the actual original A Song of Ice and Fire books now. So I am actually currently reading A Game of Thrones, which is the first book. So I will make my way through those, as well as the other books that I'm also currently reading. I'm also reading other books. But yeah, to summarize this, right, it was a semi difficult read, other than some of the key interesting bits. The way it was written was novel. It was interesting, but it was difficult to actually read. It was I found this one of the more difficult fiction books to pick up and actually read, if you know what I mean. It was harder, but I love George and George's work. Nothing against George on this, and he's written a book that's very novel, and the idea behind it was really good. I really did like that. I did actually really like the idea behind this book. Actually reading it was, I mean, look, there was lots of parts of it that were brilliant, you know, but overall, it was just a weird. Maybe if all books were written like this, you would just think, wow, this is fucking incredible. But it's just because I haven't read more books that are like this. I don't know if am I just missing out a whole like subgenre of fiction, or I don't know. But I haven't read more books like this. I found it quite difficult to actually pick up and read. It took me, it's seven, like I said, I think 711 pages, quite long. It felt quite long. It did take me yonkos to actually finish reading, because I also read other books. I've mentioned I also read other books at the same time. I don't just stick to one book until it's finished. But I'll hold this up. This is the cover, the version that I've got. Should I give it a rating? Should I give all books a rating? I don't. This is nothing against George. Again, like, I really do have a lot of respect for George. But just compare it to some of the other books I've read. Probably, honestly, probably as a whole, like, if you could take some of the individual stories out, like the stories around that are set in and around the Dance of the Dragons, the House of the Dragon ish, area and time, and the Aegon's Conquest stories, even some of the King Jaehaerys ones were quite good. But there was lots of parts of this book where it was more difficult to read. I probably honestly would give this a 5 out of 10. Oh, I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just that the amount that I wanted to pick up and read this was not as much as I have felt before. I feel so bad that my first kind of like one-on book club is giving a low ball on that, because I have read some books that are 10s, but I'm looking forward to reading and reviewing the next books that are, because I have started reading already. I've read probably like 100 pages in of Game of Thrones, and that book is like first person accounts, dialogue, thoughts and stuff, and it's it's a lot more palatable for my mind, and I'm enjoying that a lot more than I was enjoying this. Even though there were lots of parts. Look, I know I'm going over this again. I did enjoy lots of parts of this book, okay, but there were also lots of parts that were tedious to read, and I'm going over myself a lot here. But I like the concept behind the book. In practice, it wasn't the the best experience for the reader, although I did enjoy some of it. Okay. Is there anything else I can say about this? I don't think there really is. I don't really want to go into much description about it. I don't want to go into spoilers in case people watching are into House of the Dragon. But there were parts of it that I found really interesting, learning about the history of the kings of Westeros. Some of the things that were interesting about the dragons and the wall were interesting. I found that interesting. There were some parts of the story which were sweet, some parts of the story which were brutal, some parts which were funny, some parts which were like some of the things in there were like alpha as well, like some of the things that happened. There were lots of good parts. You know, as well as it being a somewhat tedious read. So it was literally so balanced on a razor's edge. That's why it gets a 5 from me, because it's like equally balanced between the good, great bits and the bad. Not that there were bad bits necessarily in the book. It's just like it was just difficult to motivate myself to read it. Before I say the same thing 50 more times, I'm going to leave it there. That concludes, the first kind of episode of the book club playlist. I'll make a playlist called Book Club or something like that. And I'm looking forward to making some more of these when I finish some more books. Hopefully I'll have a bit more to say about some of the other books. But okay, that was good. Good stuff. Oh, before I finish, even though this is book club, drink your water as well, okay? Nice one.